All right, we're literally on the heels of our last video. We stopped recording on that one, played a couple video games, and then came back out here to fix the mess I made. So if you didn't see that last video, then you won't know why the loop looks like this. So please go watch that video. Oh God, it turned chunky.
Oh.
What we're gonna do today is we're gonna clean it and take you guys along for the ride of how to clean your water loop after you put vodka or apple juice and chocolate milk through it. So I've had this loop running for a while after I put this distilled water back in here. It's crunchy out here. Like, listen. It's like, I don't know, whatever dripped out of it got all nasty. All right, so first things we have to do obviously is drain the loop. I kept it running because I didn't want this to coagulate any worse, I guess. I wanted to get as much of it to move to the pump as I could because most of it would kind of just float. We need to drain the loop. There's some tools we're gonna need though. So each block is obviously different. The EK water blocks and the Fantex block here that's on our 2080 Ti use Allen screws when it comes to holding things together. Fortunately, you're not gonna have to take the block off the card, but you're gonna wanna be careful to make sure not to get the card too wet. If a little bit does drip on there, it's fine as long as it's completely dry before you turn the card back on or plug it into power. So unplug your stuff, unplug your power supply, get everything off, get all these cables out of the way, all this crap, because we want a clean working area. So in order to do this, we are going to be using my iFixit kit. Now look, normally that's the one, that one's too big. That's what she said. Normally, we would have a really funny skit about iFixit with explosions and iFixit and all that sort of stuff, but I'm just giving you a serious conversation today. Almost 3 years ago, my wife for Father's Day gave me my first iFixit kit and I was hooked. We started playing around doing ads for them without even being sponsored. Now they're a huge sponsor of ours. We believe in what they do. They fight for right to repair. They give all sorts of materials and teardown guides, how-tos, I mean, almost any electronic you can think of when it comes to computers and monitors and tablets and phones. You can find a teardown guide, how to use their tools, how to repair your own stuff. So with Father's Day coming up, if you guys are interested in getting an iFixit kit for the father, dad, I guess that's the same thing, right? The son that's also a father, if you want to buy someone an iFixit, especially for Father's Day, so you could be as cool as my wife was, then check the description down below. You guys will find the latest promos and links to iFixit so that you can get your very own iFixit kit as well. I know it's not exactly the same kind of iFixit ad you guys are used to, but it's the realest one because we do use these primarily lately for fixing our drones, but we use these all the time when we do this type of video. So what we need to do now is drain this mess. What sucks about that is Phil is currently editing the video we shot where we made this mess. Nick is now shooting this video, which means I have no one to help me drain it. I just keep one of these 5-gallon water jugs around that I use to kind of drain everything into, and then I empty it when needed in an area that is in a way that is in accordance with your current regulations and stuff, because you can't just go throwing alcohol and all that type of stuff down the drain. So that's good enough for now. We'll continue draining the loop, getting the stuff out of the tubes, and get our parts separated. We're gonna probably want to do some sort of a flush on the radiator as well, although all of the gunk pretty much moved out of the rad in a solid piece. It was kind of gross. In fact, this is what it looked like.
Did it chemically like chunk the milk?
Ew. Okay, stop. Abort.
Oh, it's turning on!
Abort!
It's going.
Ew!
Ah! I thought he was gonna clean it, not coagulate it. Put hairballs in the
That's only gonna get stuck in everything now. Look at the GPU.
Oh!
All right, so once you get your loop all disassembled, you can get your CPU block and your GPU out. This is pretty gross. Yeah, this is disgusting. This was not supposed to go this way. We learned as a group, actually, today, group effort, what happens when alcohol and chocolate milk touch each other. It just completely like clumped up. And as such, This is a pretty good example, because even though you might be going, Jay, this video's stupid. Nobody's gonna be running chocolate milk and alcohol in their loop, so this doesn't apply. This does apply to any sort of growth or chunking up of fluids. It happens, it does happen. If you leave your loop unattended and you don't take care of it, and you get algae growth, the very same thing is gonna happen. Therefore, you're gonna need to take it apart and clean it. So the reason for taking it apart and cleaning it takes a back seat to the fact that you need to take it apart and clean it. So that's what we're educating you with today. So now that we've got our block, pretty much both our CPU block and our GPU block off here and ready to go. Oh, don't drip on, oh, at least it's just mostly alcohol. Okay, I just dripped a couple bits on the motherboard, so clearly I'm gonna wanna blow that dry as best as possible. That's why you can also get yourself one of these little blower vacs. So anyway, this is what we're working with. Man, oh. I hear you laughing, Nick. Chocolate chunky monkey crap everywhere. Okay, I'm using a nice wood table here. If you're using something nice that you care about, probably put something down to protect it. This wood table here is designed to be beat up because it's a workbench. So there's that. We're gonna use just our iFixit kit, toothbrush, and some isopropyl alcohol. Now we'll start with the CPU block because it's easiest. Most CPU blocks are similar to this. And we're just gonna kind of loosen, crack each corner loose, but not take it apart yet. You're gonna want to do two things. Well, at least one of two things. Keep in mind of the orientation of all the parts inside. Every block is a little bit different. Fortunately, you can find the manuals for just about every water block online. Or if you're like me, you like to take things apart and then later go, oh wait, how did that go? I always like to keep track of the way things are oriented with the block facing right side up. So for instance, as I'm taking these out, I'm kind of holding it together with my fingers so it doesn't fall apart. So this is right side up facing you. See the logo's correctly facing that way. So break this apart. And if I undo these two screws, which are even smaller, and I think I'm gonna do that, I'll get the RGB off of there, and then I don't have to worry about getting water all up in there. There. Now we have a 100% disassembled, ready to be cleaned GPU block, or CPU block. CPU block. They're tough, they're robust. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go get myself a red cup. This is also an O-ring here I wanna be mindful of. And I'm gonna get a red cup that I can use to just sort of like use distilled water or whatever, because I wanna soak this stuff real good. And I'm just throwing all the stuff in there, especially this guy. Look at that, it's just all up in there and nasty. So we can just sort of start cleaning it. Yeah, this discoloration right here, that's 100% the alcohol did that. And this is why I tell people all the time, alcohol in a loop is a bad idea. See, this used to be clear, but look what it did there. It totally etched it. And that's something that we've seen before. Totally knew was gonna happen, because I'm like totally saying totally a bunch like a total valley girl, which is fine. But that's what it does. It destroys the plastic. So we're gonna take this, get that in there as well, and then maybe save that one for last. And then I'll take my toothbrush, and I'll just start lightly rubbing along the grain for the little micro channels. Because what happened was this stuff completely clogged when it was really bad before I was able to use compressed air. Yes, if you didn't see the last video, please go watch it. A lot of ridiculousness ensued, and compressed air was used to get a lot of this stuff unclogged. Go with the grain, that way the bristles can get down in there and get it as clean as possible. And then just sort of flush it and keep going. Get in the corners where everything's gonna kind of build up. You wanna just do this a few times until there's nothing left on there. There's still a little bit, not much. So the jet plate is now clean. Now we'll put the O-rings in there. Look how much stuff is already floating around in there. The O-ring I'm pretty much just gonna wipe with my fingers like that. What I'm gonna do right now, it's gonna be kind of gross. So I'm gonna hit this with the air. Now you can just get a real good look at what the alcohol actually did to that clear plastic. It was not white before, it was as clear as this top. That is just nasty. It's not gonna hurt performance at all, it's just gonna look stupid. Now you might have to get a toothpick or something to really kind of pick out what gets stuck down in all these little grooves and channels. All right, so the white stuff does actually start to come off, but the problem is I'm never gonna be able to like get down into the nooks and crannies in here. I think what was happening is the alcohol was just breaking down the plastic. It's what it does, right? So the fact that it's discolored sucks for our experiment, but nonetheless, doesn't change the process. So now I'm just doing the top. Things kind of got down in between the O-rings. That shows you just how important the O-rings actually are. I mean, obviously they seal, right? So I just want to clean it here as best I can. All right, so everything's pretty much clean at this point. Now I'm going to discard of this water. I'm not going to be using this water for the block on the next part for the GPU. I'm going to reassemble this back in the reverse order in which I took it apart, and we'll move on to the GPU. All right, so it's all back together correctly, and you can still see the discoloration through the top, but you know, usually when the coolant is flowing through it, you won't notice it too badly, especially when the RGB lighting is going. But if I decide to use this block in a build and it bothers me, I have extras. And if yours is discolored, because that can happen depending on the type of fluid that you use, whether it's glycol based, ethanol based, or whatever base, then it might start to discolor like that too, because even like glycol based stuff has a glycol in it, and that can happen. It can start to break down some of the plastics over long periods of use. You can usually contact these manufacturers and get that piece replaced for free, if not a very small fee. So there we go. That's all put back together. That's ready to be used again at some point. Stick that back there. Now we're gonna move on to the one that I'm sure is going to give people anxiety, and that is the GPU block. Because if you damage your GPU, getting a new one right now is not gonna really happen too easily. So you wanna be extra careful. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove these fittings here on the back, and I'm gonna basically shove paper towels in there for now. Now this top piece does come off, and we can deal with that in a little bit, but I don't want any of the fluid coming out and just sort of dribbling down the back of the card. So I'm just gonna take paper towels and like literally thread it in like that. Because then at least that will act as like a little bit of an absorbent barrier to stop anything from getting in there. And they do actually sell threaded plugs, not like these plugs, but I mean like little rubber ones that you just shove in there or whatever. So now when I'm working on it like this, I don't have to worry about anything coming out the backside. That sounds like a joke, but you know, whatever. We'll move on. So this will probably be using the same sizes as the other ones. Yep. And then this will be the smaller one, like the RGB. Yes. Okay, so they use the same two sizes as we had with the EK block. Now the Fantex is a little different. It's got these little plastic covers on here, these little black covers that are more of an aesthetic piece. That we're gonna remove those first, just like that. That accesses the rest of the screws. So just remember the smaller head screws, if you're taking apart a Fantex block like this, go onto the decorative covers. You're gonna wanna keep track of what screw came out of where as well. You wanna keep track of what screw came out of where as well, or at least be mindful if any of them are at any different lengths, because if you're not careful, this is when you could potentially damage something by having it protrude through the, well, if it's too long, then what's gonna happen is it's not gonna tighten down properly, and then the O-ring will leak and it will leak onto your graphics card. However, I don't anticipate that being a thing here because the blocks are pretty much the same length, or the bolts are the same length because it's the same level all the way around. So I'm just gonna go through and just give each of these screws a little bit of a turn, like a half turn, maybe more like a quarter turn, till they're loose, but I don't want them coming off yet. Because what I wanna do is make sure I have paper towels ready, because I don't want it dripping on the PCB. Now, if something does drip on the PCB, that sucks, but it's not the end of the world, because again, until you turn the card on and it sees power, nothing will short. Okay, so now I'm gonna go around and just get these all loose, but I'm not gonna pop them out of their spot yet. You'll notice too, as you loosen it, it's gonna kind of feel like it keeps tightening as you go around. That's because the O-ring is pushing back against it. Eventually it gets to the point where the O-ring is no longer compressed, and then it won't have any resistance as you undo the screws. I'm gonna get my paper towel ready. In this case, I'm using blue shop towels. This terminal, if you have a terminal like this on your graphics card, it's always connected to the acrylic top, not the metal part. So you don't necessarily have to take that off. Now we will be in this instance because I don't know if anything nasty got in there. I mean, as you can see, this block looks like somebody took a big old poo in it. So we're just gonna lift this straight up, and you might have to wiggle it a little bit. And there we go. Take the O-ring out gently. There is some water on the PCBs. We'll be blowing that out real good. And one thing you can do too, and this part always freaks people out. You ready? You can take alcohol and spray it in there where the water got. Now the alcohol will create a faster evaporating environment. I can't remember exactly what it's called. Isn't that gross? Start with cleaning this guy up. We'll set the PCB aside for now. And I'm just gonna wipe it right now without using any sort of chemicals. The nice thing about acrylic, it's very difficult to stain. Now you could take this into the bathroom, run it under the sink, get any crud out that's stuck in there. First I wanna get whatever I can with the towel. In the corners like this, you can use a toothbrush. That'll get the stuff that's like stuck in the corners out. You can see so far I haven't even done anything except wipe it, and how much better it looks. Just put a little bit of distilled water in here now. You also want to make sure any fingerprints and stuff you get on the inside of the acrylic here, you wipe those off, because once you put it back together, it's going to show if you leave them there. So that's the top piece. And you can see we didn't use any harsh chemicals or anything on that, just distilled water. We'll set that aside, and now we'll come over here. Same thing. I'm just going to take the brush and just start wiping it like this. Now this can be a little bit more difficult to get looking real nice, and I have no problems using alcohol on this bit, because it's metal, nickel plated. You can see some of this is just really, I mean really stuck down in there. So I'm just gonna keep working it with the brush, wiping it, working it, wiping it, working it, wiping it. Sounds like a Saturday night. And then we're gonna see how it looks. You might be tempted to use a Brillo pad, but don't, it'll scratch it. Some of these bits are like really, and I mean really stuck to the metal. Like there was like a chemical reaction that happened there or something. It just really, really stuck. So I'm really having to take a lot of time on this. And it's coming clean, slowly but surely. Like this is when I would rather just maybe even take the block off and submerge it in something, which I'm thinking I might end up doing, just because this is not, I was trying to make it so that we don't have to repaste the block and stuff, but we did more work to tear this off than the block actually would be to come off. See, like all this is just really caked on there. If you get it wet with the alcohol, then it will start to come off. It's just, there's some sort of a weird bonding that's happening there. So what we're gonna do next, I was trying to do this without having to take the block off, but we're gonna do that. Now we'll be able to make sure, obviously, that the card is as stuck on as possible, or clean as possible and dry and all that. So this is where hopefully you still have your instructions on how your block went together. So it's kind of funny how fast this is working with just regular hand soap and water here. So if we had just done this route to begin with, we'd probably be done already. So, I mean, if you're comfortable taking your block off, hopefully you're the one that put it on. Hand soap is just such good stuff. Works on everything. You should get all the soap out of there. Now you might notice a little bit of discoloration in there. That's actually normal. That's from the flow of the coolant going over it over time. Now remember, this is not a brand new water block. This was used for more than a year. And so there's a little bit of discoloration in the nickel plating. Totally normal. How far it goes, how much it changes color, how far through it'll go. Sometimes it can go all the way through to the copper underneath. This is a copper plate. It's gonna depend everything to do with the manufacturer, what kind of process they used, how thick it is to begin with. And you know, every single bit of nickel is going to do this. So what we're gonna do now is we are going to go ahead and reassemble our block, reapply our thermal paste here. The board's all nice and dry, nothing got in there. Yeah, everything looks good. So let me get this reapplied. Now, if you're wondering what thermal paste we use, I essentially use Kingpin KPX on everything. Ever since we've used it for our sub-zero overclocking or, you know, cooling for overclocking, it works at all temperatures. It's amazing stuff, and I will just use that from now on. You can actually drop a few C just by using it, even on conventional stuff that's not extreme water cooling. And yes, I use a lot of it, mostly so I give you guys something to complain about. Okay, so now that the block is reattached to the card, we get to start the painstaking task of getting the O-ring back in the channel with all these bends. Now, we take our plexi piece once again, lay it back down, and then we can start putting these screws back in. Now remember, on this particular block, there's some raised parts and there's some lower parts. The raised parts get the longer bolts, or screws, whatever you want to call them. And the non-raised parts get the short ones. So I like to get it started like a wheel on a car, kind of diagonal and stuff. So one across here, like a star pattern. That way I know everything lines up. Because the problem is you might start putting them all in on one side, and then you might get them in, but then it might be off just enough where the holes don't line up on the other side. So keep that in mind as you're going around. So I would just kind of pick 4 corners, get everything started, and then you're good to go. All right, so there you go. CPU block is clean and ready to use again. GPU block is clean and ready to use again. And didn't take a whole lot of crazy effort. I mean, I should have probably just taken the block off from the beginning. I would have saved myself some time there, but as you can see, no more junk in there. It would have a perfect flow rate. Might look a little bit cloudy. It's because we just dried it off. When it's wet, it'll look a lot clearer again. This piece right here, like I said, if I decide to use this block in the future, I'll replace that internal jet plate or the plastic flow plate because that looks bad. But you know what? Now we'd be able to put this right back in our system with thermal paste, of course, and be up and running in no time. As long as you guys don't go and put chocolate milk and alcohol in your loops, you shouldn't have to deal with any of this. But loop maintenance, usually after a few years, might require you to tear it apart and do some cleaning. Depending on how much that time is worth to you, you might just replace the parts altogether in terms of what blocks you're using. Which means most of the time people keep their blocks until they change the part anyway, usually without requiring any sort of a tear down. All right, thanks for watching. Anytime we have to do any sort of maintenance or work, we always take you guys along for the ride so you can learn something. As always, we appreciate your guys' view, and we'll see you guys in the next one.